Okay, I will just start very quickly by sharing my slides and explaining where I am from. For those who don't know me, just accept anyone who's coming in the meeting if I don't have my screen open to do that. Great. So I'm Mary. I run Think Human Fund, and I really have the pleasure of working with an amazing network of ambassadors. So we have 64 ambassadors working together with us. The team of Think Human Fund, we're just 2. And on top of our network of ambassadors, we are identifying the projects, following the projects, and really helping the team to make sure we have an impact. We have now a network of volunteers that are accepting to do some workshops. And so this is very new for us. Workshop, we actually have 400,000 people in the company in Concentrics, which is really huge. And these 400,000 people are very skilled, obviously. And so we start with data and analytics workshops, but we will open new session on leadership, on pitch presentation, this kind of thing. So I will tell you all. Our contacts in your organization will receive some invites and they will be able to transfer to whoever in their team. So let's start for today's workshop. It's going to be about data and analytics, advanced analytics, predictive models around fundraising campaigns and volunteering. And last time it was really about the data architecture and infrastructure. So I was saying in the introduction that I could for sure send you recap and the recording of the last session if you're interested. So now I'll really let the team of data and analytics present. But before that, I'm going to beg you to answer our survey just after the presentation. Why? It's because we want really these workshops to be useful. We want them to be answering your needs. It's super complicated to run a nonprofit, and we really want to make a difference and help you in your day-to-day work. And we can't do that if you don't answer this survey at the end, so we can understand your needs and make our workshops more accurate. So I will copy that in the chat, and we will try to stop the meeting 3 minutes before the end, so you can really answer this survey. Now I think Pradeep, or maybe Subrata, it's up to you. I'll let you share your slides.
Sure. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Thanks a lot.
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much, Mary. Pradeep will be presenting today on the advanced analytics and predictive models and machine learning, all that we can do in NPO with use cases to actual business problems, which we can solve using this data and analytics techniques. Over to you, Pradeep. Pradeep, you are on mute. You may be speaking on mute, Pradeep.
Yeah. Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Pradeep. I lead the data science practice for the APAC region here, and I'll lead this session. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your locations. I'll go off camera because I can't see myself when I start presenting, and we'll start sharing my screen now. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Okay. Try once more.
If you have times, I will be able to share your screen. I have it too.
No, I can do it.
Okay, good.
Okay. Do let me know if you can see it now. I've just started sharing.
Yes. All good.
Okay, so this would be our today's agenda. I would start with a recap of what was covered earlier. Just please give me a minute. I'll just use the pointer. Okay, so I'll start with a recap of what was covered earlier, a quick recap, in fact, and then I'll give you a brief primer on what predictive analytics is all about. then talk about fundraising models, campaign optimization, volunteer engagement, and a few practical considerations that should be taken into account when you get started on this journey. I have a few case studies for each of them, fundraising, campaign optimization, volunteer engagements, and I'll end with a few takeaways. So that would be the agenda for today. Any questions before I get started? Okay, I will be happy to take questions towards the end, but if you have questions in between, um, I have one of my colleagues, Suresh, has joined this meeting, was kindly consented to answer as much as he can. If there are anything that are left unanswered, I'd be happy to take them towards the end. Okay, okay. With that, I get started. So this is the value curve. Now, this would have been covered during our early meeting as well. I'm sorry, the training that happened last month. The number 5 and 6 are the portions that I would be focusing on. But if I were to quickly walk you through this, obviously any analytics exercise starts with the data management process, which is about getting the databases correct. You would have donor events, digital data organized, all of that in the data management. And then you would have the basic reports without which you don't understand what really is happening, right? So these reports will help us summarize what's happening, how are we compliant, and this unfortunately would not help drive strategic decisions. So that is where the statistical analysis comes in. The next portion comes in. So here you are able to understand why donors drop off and what are the engagement drivers. And predictive analytics help us understand future scenarios using AI and ML. Now, my main focus during this session would be to talk about predictive models and prescriptive models. This is where we start seeing value acceleration. And that's because predictive analytics allows us to evaluate prescribed alternatives and recommend the right actions. So we are optimizing fundraising strategies, improving volunteer recruitment, enhancing retention. All of that can be done through data-driven insights. And then prescriptive analytics, at this level, we go beyond prediction to intelligent automation. Now, because this includes analytical computing systems that learn and interact naturally, and there will also be personalized outreach. There would be virtual assistants that can handle complex donor interactions and continuously learn from each engagement. Now, as we go up this curve, we are not just increasing our analytics sophistication, we're also able to transform how we engage with our objectives or mission through self-learning analytics that deliver exponentially greater impact. So I will focus on these two areas now, talking about the different things that happen are related to optimizing fundraising strategies, improving the volunteer recruitment. We'll also talk about personalized outreach programs, all of that. Let me now talk about predictive analytics, what it really is at a very fundamental level. So predictive analytics is about turning whatever historical data you have into almost like something like a crystal ball. Instead of making allocation decisions based on last year's approach or hunches that we have or gut instinct, what we are doing here is we are using data patterns to make informed predictions about how future events and behaviors are likely to take shape. So that's predictive analytics. Now, what do we need for this? First, the most important thing is historical data, because everything starts with historical data. The expectation is that the past would repeat to some extent, not exactly the way it was, but to a large extent, there would be a repetition of what has happened in the past. So that's why historical data is our gold mine. We can't do without this. So essentially, we're talking about things like demographics, purchase history, sales transaction, by product and time period, all of that. So those are the things that help us here. I'm not talking about not profit here. I'm talking about generally what predictive analytics is. I will anyway talk about specifically non-profit related analytics in the upcoming slides. So here I'm just talking about what kind of data usually leads to predictive analytics. Now, after that comes pattern learning. Now, here is where a lot of learning happens. Here, the algorithms are able to identify recurring trends and relationships that we humans might actually miss. I'll give you an example. Let's say we discover that customers who buy a product A also buy product B, and this happens 60% of the time. Or let's say mobile purchases consistently peak between, let's say, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. on weekdays. Usually, such events, when you observe them, they are not coincidences, they are actionable patterns that can be put to use. So that's where pattern learning comes in. And after that, it's of course prediction and prescription. Now, predictive analytics, what we're doing here is we've learned what will happen, right? Now we are using that information to decide how we should go about making sure that that will definitely happen. We can create, let's say, targeted product bundles. We are pairing complementary items and predict exactly who should receive these offers, because we learned here, right? A and B go together. So then we can make product bundles. And then we can also predict which customers should actually receive these offers. We can also launch maybe mobile optimized evening campaigns when we know conversion rates will be highest. So those kind of things can be done. Now, the bottom line really is that predictive analytics can transform guesswork or gut instinct into a strategic advantage. This ensures that every resource we allocate is backed by data driven insights and never it's just by intuition. And at the bottom, I have few companies that have been extremely successful with the prediction and prescription analytics that I spoke about. We all have experienced what Amazon can do, right? When you make a purchase, it tells you people who bought this also buy that. So it's able to give you those recommendations. Netflix, again, has touched all of our lives, right? So we all watch movies, and when you like something, it gives you the next recommendation. Maybe you will like this as well. So all that is just based on prediction and prescription, and we can bring that into the nonprofit arena as well. And banks always do fraud detection, not just one bank. Almost all the banks do fraud detection, and that's purely based on historical data and pattern learning, using which they create the predictions and prescriptions. Okay, so with that, I will move on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about typical learnings employed. Now, it might look a little complicated, but I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. This is just to make you aware that the upcoming slides where I talk about predictive analytics, when you see all those, these are the things that are happening in the background. Just to make you aware of that, nothing more. I won't spend much time. You don't need to understand the details to benefit from the results. So I'm just going to run through this slide. So you can probably say that there are three types of techniques. Business intelligence, where we start with, right? You need reports and dashboards that help you understand what has happened. After that comes the conventional statistical methods. So these are proven mathematical approaches that help us understand or assess future potential scenarios. And then comes the machine learning and generative AI. Now, these are the advanced techniques that can perform or forecast performance and identify complex patterns that I spoke of in the earlier slide. Now, what really matters is this. All of these categories, business intelligence, statistical methods, machine learning, they will all be used together to solve most of the predictive analytics problems we're going to discuss. But you don't need to really choose one approach, but I'm going to cover these portions today. Mostly whatever I speak of in the upcoming slides would have used either the conventional statistical methods or machine learning and generative AI, those kind of things. So from your perspective, you don't have to worry about these complexities. You just have to define the business problem that you want to solve. Could be donor retention, could be volunteer engagement, or even campaign optimization. Any of these techniques would work, and we will be able to choose what works best for the problem at hand. So that's the idea behind showing you this slide. So I will go on to the next one. Yeah. Now, before we dive into predictive modeling in greater detail, we need to answer one critical question. Do you have sufficient historical data? Because as I said, this is the key to any predictive analytics projects. Do you have sufficient data? Now, ideally, sufficient data can be defined as 1+ years data, 1 or more than 1 year's data. Now, if you have that, then you can go here. But if you don't have, I don't think you need to worry at this point. It's just that without this foundation, predictive modeling becomes expensive guesswork. So it's important to get this right first. So if there is no historical data, it's just that you shouldn't jump into predictive modeling yet. You should focus on data collection first. Just start gathering the donor behavior, giving patterns, or monitor campaign engagement metrics. Gather all of these, and then think of building the predictive models later once you have these details. So if you don't have the data, not to worry, you're not behind. You're just going to sequence what you have to achieve in the right manner. We'll start with data collection first then. Now let's say you have the data. You have all the data, 1+ year data. The next step is to focus on what you want to achieve. There could be multiple things that you can do right. I have listed fundraising campaigns and volunteer engagement, but you may have something else in mind. So if there are other things, you just need to decide what would be the thing that you're working on. I've assumed that these would be the ones, and I've use cases that I've listed here are based on the assumption that these would be the ones that you would want to work on. Could be response rate or optimizing the channel mix or identifying your best prospect, any of those. But you don't have to really stick to this, but essential to choose what you want to focus on. And then this is something very important before you get started on any engagement. I've spoken about the first one, the 12 to 24 months of data for consistent and reliable predictions. So not much time will I spend on that. Let me go to the next one. But you will still need the right resources to get started. So you might have to say budget for staff training, and maybe there could be some technology costs, because predictive analytics isn't just about setting it and then forgetting it altogether. There will be a costs, and you need to consider that as well. Very important is the third one, ethical use, often not spoken about much, but very important to respect the donor privacy throughout the process. So that's another thing. Then it's about defining the clear key performance indicators that we should measure. I mean, that we would use to measure the effectiveness of the solution that we have developed. So that should be clear. I've listed retention rates or response rates. It could be others as well. Finally, I would say it's important to pilot with one area. Prove the return on investment in that area before you expand to other use cases. Okay, so with that said, I will now go on to the predictive models for fundraising. So when it comes to predictive modeling and fundraising, I have picked three areas that I believe would deliver the maximum return on investment. One is a donor propensity modeling. This answers the fundamental question, who's likely to donate again? Then you have the donor lifetime value, which helps us predict the long-term value of our donors. So we can invest appropriately in those relationships, right? If you know this is the one that's going to pay in the long term, maybe that's the relationship you should invest in more. And then there's major gift likelihood. It identifies prospects with the capacity and also the propensity to donate large, right? So these are the three things that I've picked. Now, I'm just going to talk about a real world impact. What could happen if we use predictive modeling in these cases? So let's say there's a nonprofit organization that's using predictive modeling to identify lapsed donors who could be re-engaged. Now, instead of a mass outreach, hoping that something would stick, it's better that they analyze the past giving patterns and maybe the communication preferences and the demographic data. All of this, when analyzed together, they should be able to identify a few number of donors with personalized campaigns. The outcome could be much better than what it would have been if there was a mass outreach program. Examples I've just given here, about 35% reactivation rate could result in such focused campaigns, personalized campaigns, and about $150,000 in recovered donations. See, when you take a predictive analytics approach than a mass approach and you get results, it's not really luck, as some people believe. It's really predictive analytics turning the data into dollars. So the benefits that we are able to deliver with such a approach are two things. One, you're getting increased efficiency in donor outreach. You're no longer wasting time or resources on prospects that are very unlikely to respond. The second advantage is you get higher conversion rates because you're reaching the right people with the right message and maybe also the right time. So that's the advantage you get. So predictive modeling will help you transform fundraising from a pure numbers game, I would say, into a precision strategy. Instead of actually casting a wide net and hoping that some of them will respond, you're using precision to identify and engage with the most valuable prospects and donors. I'll now walk you through a use case on how this work can be done. So, this is about a nonprofit that was facing some problems with donor attrition. So with donor attrition, I'm sure all of you realize what can happen, right? A substantial portion of the donor base becomes inactive, and that's a good amount of lost revenue and also reduced funding capacity. Now, traditional outreach efforts weren't working. What was happening with those traditional outreach efforts were that there were poor response rates, and your resources are being wasted on donors who are very unlikely to engage. So that was the problem. So what was the need that they, I mean, what kind of solution did the non-profit organization need? So they need an approach which would identify which lapsed owners were most likely to re-engage and how to reach them in the most effective manner. The effective manner could be a personalized messaging that would resonate well with their individual giving motivations. So it was important to create that kind of a solution. So what can be done in these kind of scenarios is what I'm going to talk about now. So ideally, what the organization should do is create a comprehensive predictive modeling approach. And that begins by analyzing the historical donor data. And this donor data could be across multiple dimensions, right? There could be past giving patterns, there could be donation frequency, there could be amounts, there could be communication preferences, there could also be demographic information. So many different kind of data might be available, but all of this should be used together to create a data-driven analysis. And using this, you would be able to develop a predictive model to finally score and rank all the lapsed donors based on their likelihood of re-engagement. Let me talk about that in a little more greater detail. What I mean is this. In most of the predictive analytics, the final output is usually a probability of whether somebody will re-engage or not re-engage. Now, probability always ranges from 0 to 1, right? 0 being the lowest probability, and if it's closer to 1, let's say something like 0.995 and all that, it's a very high probability that somebody would re-engage. So the final output of any predictive analytics exercise could be a probability. Now, how do we use that probability? What we do is we arrange all the prospects based on their probability in descending order. So at the top, I have the people who are more likely to re-engage with us. Now, once I have that, it becomes easier to decide who I should talk to more, who should I engage with more, who are the people who are more likely to respond positively to an outreach program. So that's what we're doing here with the predictive model. Now, from this analysis, they were able to identify about 500 former donors who showed the highest probability of reactivation. After that, it's about designing and executing a very personalized outreach campaign, which would be tailored to each of those donors' historical preferences. This ensures that the communication is effective and also we're choosing the right channel for the maximum impact. Typically, the kind of results you see when you take such an approach is that you could find about 30 to 35% donor reactivation rate being achieved because you're not going after everyone. You've managed to find, let's say, about 500 former donors who had the highest probability of reactivation. So you can have a very focused campaign just on them. And consequently, you're able to achieve a higher donor reactivation rate. And the average donation amount also could be higher per reactivated donor. So this isn't just successful re-engagement. By focusing just on the people who are more likely to re-engage, you're making it a very profitable and sustainable donor relationship rebuilding. So that's the impact predictive analytics can have on this kind of a use case. I'll take a pause here before I go forward. Any questions for me? Or you can even leave the questions in the chat window.
Seems clear. I'll drop the PowerPoint also in the chat. So some of them have arrived later. So maybe they need the introduction to catch up. So I'll drop them.
Okay. Yeah, please feel free to ask me if you have any questions. I'm happy to take them. For now, I'm assuming there are no questions. I'll move on to the.
Yeah, so I think there was a broader question, Pradeep, on
Yeah,
whether we can use structured and unstructured data for, I mean, what type of data we need to use for predictive analytics. I basically
yeah,
mentioned that it
yeah.
can be both structured and unstructured, but if you can give a little more clarity around that, that would be great.
Sure, we can use both structured and unstructured data. Structured is usually numerical data, which we also call tabular data. That is
Mm-hmm.
what we generally use for any predictive analytics engagement. But can't we use unstructured data? Absolutely, we can use that too. Unstructured data can be of multiple types. Let me just give an example. Unstructured could be text, where someone writes a message saying, um, expressing their interest in re-engaging or expressing their interest to donate for a good cause, things like that. That's unstructured data. It's all text. Uh, there are other types of unstructured data. I'm not sure what the questioner had in mind when they asked. The other types of unstructured data are images or videos. I'm assuming you were not considering those things. You were talking about textual data. If you had textual data in mind, yes, very much. We can use both of these for predictive analytics.
Hi. Yes, so I put it in the chat. So we've got a range of a few years of feedback of participants that have gone on these initiatives, and I'm trying to just basically ascertain whether, I mean, the feedback has been quite positive, but ultimately being able to get the analytics relating to that, are we able to utilize that? And it's probably for the last 4 5 years I'm able to get that information, but it's not a lot of participants. Are we still able to get data from there?
Yeah. If we have the responses, you're saying you have the last few years of response, we can very much analyze that data to identify a lot of things. One could be how many of them were positive in nature. Positive could help. I mean, those could be the ones to reach out to in the future as well, right? What kind of
Mm-hmm.
sentiment did they express? Was it negative, neutral, or positive? Those kind of things. Did they talk about certain specific topics? Did they, I mean, let's say these were donors who had made contributions in the past. Did they express interest in contributing to a certain type of cause compared to
Mm-hmm.
some other? So those kind of insights can also be extracted from textual data. So the answer is very much yes, we can use that type of data. In fact, we do a lot of text analytics work in
Mm-hmm.
our organization. So yeah, it's very much possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I will move on to the next one then. Okay, now we'll talk about campaigns, predictive models for campaigns. Now, when it comes to campaign effectiveness, predictive modeling can help here as well. It can help us answer many questions on how we can transform our outreach and engagement. Now, I've listed about 5 different types of use cases here, but there could be others as well. And just because I've listed these, it doesn't mean we can't work on other use cases. We can do any other as well. All we need, as I said earlier, is good data, nothing else. So first, I'll talk about response modeling. So instead of sending everyone the same appeal, we can always identify who is more likely to respond to specific outreach methods. Should this donor receive an email, or should it be a social media engagement, or should it be a phone call? The data will tell us that. We will not guess. We'll not have any gut feel based off outreach. It's all based on what the data was telling us on what happened in the past. Next, it's about channel optimization. Now, channel optimization takes this even further by predicting the best communication channel for each engagement. We don't have to guess whether the direct mail works or the digital mail works. We are predicting it based on individual patterns that we have seen in the past. Then it's about message testing the type of messages. Now, here we can leverage the feedback from A/B testing. A/B testing is, let's say there were two modes of communication. You compare both modes of communication and what you've used in the past to determine which message resonates better with certain type of donor profiles. So once we have a fair idea of what works best with certain kind of profiles, we can use those messages instead for that type of profile rather than sending a very similar message to all types of donors. So it's, you can probably call it a sophisticated message matching technique. So that's something which we use for message testing. Then there is seasonal giving patterns. This helps us predict the right time for fundraising appeals. Usually it's been observed that there's a traditional calendar based approaches that are followed. Rather, we can identify when each donor segment is most likely to give based on past history, and that will maximize our campaign effectiveness. Then there is also response rate forecasting. Now, this is enabled by realistic goal setting, predicting expected response rates for different campaign types and donor segments. I mean, this kind of allows us to set what are realistic targets or achievable targets. And once we know what are those targets, you can also allocate resources appropriately. So those are the 5 use cases, but I also have an upcoming case study that demonstrates how models work to identify the best prospect or lead. This shows the practical applications of these predictive approaches that I'm just talking about here so far in a real world scenario. Now, the next one is not related to the nonprofit world. This is one of the um, projects that we worked on internally as well, but in a very related scenario. We had to find out who are the best people to reach out to buy a certain kind of product. So let me just go there. So we at Concentrix, we deal with multiple clients, and there was this client for whom we were getting interest in corporate gift card purchases. So what happens here is there are companies that express interest in buying gift cards for our client, and we had to reach out to the right people, right being defined as the ones who are more likely to purchase, and make sure that they convert. Current conversion was only about 14%, which means you reach out to 100 people, just 14 were buying. That wasn't good enough. The client wanted it to take it up to at least 20%. Of course, higher the better, but the minimum expectation was that we would achieve at least a conversion rate of 20. So what we did here was we implemented a 3-phase methodology. We began with, as usual, the comprehensive data analysis. So we looked at the distribution analysis of multiple data attributes that had been shared with us. Then we did something that we do in predictive analytics, which we call feature importance analysis. Now you have a lot of things. Let's say you have demographic data, you have what has a buyer bought in the past, you have, let's say, a buyer profile, you have a lot of information about the buyers. But what is the most important among all of this to predict whether somebody would buy or not? That's called feature importance analysis. We did that as well in this project. And then we did a statistical validation to understand lead conversion patterns and identify the best performance drivers. So that's really the 3-phase process. So beginning with the data analysis, we start with the distribution analysis, the statistical validation to understand the lead conversion patterns. Then we move on to identifying the best features. And this was derived, as I said, by comparing each of the attributes that they had shared with us, their prediction strength. That's what we were looking at here. After all of this is done, we take all of those attributes to develop a machine learning model. And this is the predictive analytics solution. For this particular use case that I'm talking about, we had about 4 critical variables. One was a lead source, where the lead originated, which month were they buying, which city was the buyer located in, and the past purchase details. So all of this together demonstrated the highest correlation with successful conversion. That's why these 4 were picked. And after that, we implemented the solution and tested the model's accuracy and reliability as well. And we found that this had resulted in a very high success rate for our client. 45% of the impact could be captured by calling only 16% of the leads. Now, if you just remember the first use case that I spoke about, I told you that we would have probability as the endpoint, right, of any predictive exercise. You have a probability which says whether somebody will buy or not. Let's say Mary may have a probability of, say, 0.95, which means 95% chance that she'll buy. See, but I would probably have a probability of, let's say, 75%. So lesser chances of me buying a product compared to that of Mary's. So then probably Mary is the one you should target and not me, because if you spend time on me, you're not allocating resources in the best possible manner. So what we did is we identified the best set of people who are more likely to buy something. So we were able to capture 45% of the buyers by only calling 10% of the population, which is a good thing, right? Just earlier, they would have contacted all of the population, but we told them go after just this 10% of the population, you will get 45% of your buyers from this population. So that was a huge advantage. And as the same word I used earlier, I would just like to repeat. It's very precise, neat way of capturing who are the best possible leads to contact. And I would say more importantly, they also achieved 4.2% improvement in their conversion rates by calling the group that we had identified for contact. So that's how advantageous it is to employ predictive analytics for these kind of exercises, because you're able to allocate the minimum resources you have to get the maximum impact. With that, I will move on to the next one, which is about uh, volunteer engagement. But if there are any questions, I can take them now before I go on to the next one. If there's something that was not very clear, I'm happy to repeat them as well. Okay, I will move on to the next one. So this is about volunteer engagement. Now, again, I'm talking about predictive intelligence here. So volunteer management presents, I would say, very unique challenges that predictive modeling can solve very systematically. Because here we are dealing with people and very valuable people, right? Because they're giving their time freely. So it's important to understand their motivations, their availability, and likelihood to stay engaged, because all of these are very critical for the program's success, right? So I've identified about few use cases, but as I mentioned earlier, we are not restricted by these use cases. We can work on any kind of use cases that present itself as long as there is historical data available. Talking about the first one, it's a retention model, volunteer retention model. This helps us identify which volunteer is at a higher risk of dropping off before they leave, because it's important to identify before they leave. Only then you can take some proactive intervention. So we can perhaps reach out, address their concerns, or maybe adjust their roles before we lose them completely. And predictive modeling helps us identify who are such volunteers. Then it's about matching the models. I mean, matching the volunteer skills rather. So volunteer matching, we can find the best fit opportunities based on the skills of the volunteers and their availability. I mean, instead of hoping that they find the right role themselves, we can systematically match people to the positions where they will be most effective and maybe satisfied as well, right? That also reduces the chance of leaving. So we can develop models for this as well. Then there's engagement scoring. Here we are identifying highly engaged volunteers compared to the passive ones. This helps us recognize who are our champions. We can understand what drives their engagement, and maybe this will also help us convert passive volunteers into more active ones. And then there's capacity forecasting. Now, this is very important, right? Because you need to predict volunteer availability during the peak seasons. This will help us optimize the staffing for such programs. Otherwise, we will be left scrambling during the busy periods, or maybe even over recruiting when there are slower times. And then we have volunteer recruitment conversion. I mean, predicting among the attendees of any program who are more likely to convert into active volunteers. And this will be purely based on the past engagement patterns. And now this helps us focus recruitment efforts on the most promising prospects rather than focus on all attendees. Again, I have an upcoming case example which demonstrate how predictive models work in practice, forecasting which volunteers will sign up for the next big event. So let me go there. Okay, now this is the problem that they were dealing with. Obviously, I've spoken about it a little. So the nonprofit organization here was facing one challenge, and that is something that most such organizations often struggle with. So unpredictable volunteer turnout for most of the major events. Now, what this leads to is there could either be understaffing that compromises the event quality, or sometimes there could be overstaffing that wastes valuable resources. Both are not acceptable, right? So that's the problem that they wanted to solve. Now, it's not that they had not tried solving it. They had tried solving it using traditional methods. Traditional probably being defined as estimating volunteer participation based on the sign up trends. People would have signed up, okay, you can estimate this many people would turn up, or manual guesswork. Now, that doesn't really help, right? Because it results in planning inefficiencies and again, last minute scrambling to make sure that we're able to meet the numbers. Now, they needed a reliable way to predict which of the current volunteers would commit to and show up for the next fundraising gala. I mean, this affects everything, right? Because there's so many of things involved here, and there's venue planning, there's food arrangements, and then there's coordinator scheduling, all of that. So it was important to get it right. So how can predictive analytics help here? Let me talk about that. So the best way to solve for this problem is to analyze the historical volunteer data across multiple dimensions. Now, the dimensions could mean past event participation rates, seasonal availability patterns, the tenure of the volunteers, their engagement frequencies, and obviously there could be demographic factors that can play a big role. Um, Metrics like age of the volunteer and the location proximity to the venue, all of this would have an important role to play. But identifying what are those is the first step and the most important one, because this would act as an input for our predictive model. After that, it's about developing a scoring model. So whenever I use the word scoring model, I'm referring to creating a probability. So it's about then creating a scoring model that would create weights for all of the data that I spoke about. I mean, there could be things like previous no-show rates, volunteer role preferences, and there could also be things like communication response times when you send them an email talking about an upcoming event. All of this should help us predict the likelihood of participation. And once you develop the model using all of these, and there could also be external factors like if there is another event happening close by, that can also impact the participation in this. Seasonal trends can also play a role. So using all of this, it's possible to develop a predictive model which would be able to very accurately tell us which of the volunteers are more likely to turn up for the event that has been planned. And unlike the some of the other predictive models where we don't have a lot of input data, this is one such problem where you can have a lot of historical data available for volunteers because these were volunteers in the past. You should have a lot of data for them. And consequently, the advantage with that is when you have a lot of data, you should be able to achieve much higher forecasting accuracy. The numbers that I have here, the potential outcomes, clearly tell us that you can achieve about 80 to 85% accuracy in volunteer turnout for events. Now, when you have such high accuracy rates, what happens is it really transforms your planning from guesswork to precision, right? That's the impact it can have. And obviously, it can also have a big impact in operational matters as well, right? Because the 35 to 40% reduction in last minute volunteer recruitment efforts would mean there would be better planning. Now you would be able to allocate resources more efficiently, create more targeted recruitment for any shortfalls that you find, or even develop potential personalized outreach messages, right? To encourage participation from high probability volunteers. Maybe the high probability volunteers didn't turn up in large numbers, say maybe once or twice in the past. But now that you've identified who those people are, you will be able to create messaging to target them so that they do turn up for sure. Any questions before I move on? Okay, I'll now move on to the last part of my presentation. So a few practical considerations that you should take into account before you begin this journey into predictive analytics. So I've listed 5 of them. Obviously, it starts with a data requirement. So as I said earlier, this is a non-negotiable thing. So clean, structured or unstructured data serves as a foundation. But if the data is not clean, don't worry about it. We can clean that data and make it ready for predictive modeling. If your data is incomplete or let's say inconsistent or not well organized, the models will reflect that. So that's why it's so important to clean the data. You might have data, but it's also important to pre-process that and clean it to make sure that you get quality results out of that data. So that's the first part, getting data and cleaning them and have it ready for analysis. Second is about having tools. Now, tools that nonprofits use usually don't require a very massive IT budget. There are simple tools also that can, I wouldn't call them simple, I'm just calling them simple because they're less priced. So tools like Excel or Power BI, Google AutoML, and there's also a Salesforce tool, which the name that I'm not able to recall, I think it's Salesforce for Nonprofit. So there are tools like that which will make implementation possible even without a very highly specialized team. So the barrier to entry into predictive modeling is actually lower than what many organizations assume it is because of the presence of these kind of tools. And then ethics. I spoke about this at the beginning, very important thing, because ethical use of any predictive model is very important. It can't be an afterthought. Any bias in the data or the algorithms should be addressed. And there should also be transparency in how we are using the donor or volunteer information, and we should preserve their privacy, preserve the donor volunteer trust through responsible data practices. Our mission really depends on maintaining integrity in how we handle the personal information of so many people. So that's very important. Can't be an afterthought, as I said. Then it's about, let me talk about how quick wins can be achieved. It's good to start small and grow predictive capacity in a sustainable manner. We shouldn't try to build everything at once. It's good to start with one use case, demonstrate value, and then expand systematically, because then you get a lot of buy-in from within the organization. And I would say you should start with simple metrics and build from there on. I mean, you can start by tracking basic key performance indicators, which I've called KPIs here. KPIs could be things like donor retention rate or volunteer hours or program reach before you move on to advanced predictive models. There is another reason why I'm saying this is important, because you need baseline measurements. Before you build any predictive model, you need to know where you stand today. Only then the predictive model will define value. If you right away develop a predictive model, you would get some value out of it, that's for sure. But how much better it is than what you were doing previously, that you would know only if you have these metrics in place. So that's how important this is. So the bottom line really is this. To have a successful predictive modeling, it isn't about having just the technology. It's also about having the right foundation, also setting the realistic expectation, and very important, as I said, the ethical practices that will support this entire mission. With that, I'll move on to the takeaways. I'm going to quickly summarize most of the things that I covered here. So the first one is a problem definition. Very important to identify the problem that needs to be solved and also get the relevant data. We shouldn't really start with the technology. Instead, we should start with the challenge. What is the challenge we're trying to solve for? Is it donor retention? Is it volunteer engagement? Is it campaign effectiveness? We should define the specific problem clearly first. Then check whether we have the historical data needed to solve for that problem. And as I said, you need about a little over 12 months of data at least to make sure that you can create reliable predictions of what would happen. Let me just add one more thing. I just said data, more than 12 months of data. Let me say 12 months of consistent and good data. You need that to make sure that you're getting reliable predictions. I'm just going to quickly say that again. So identify the problem that you want to work with, then make sure you have the right data to solve for that problem, and then that data should be at least about 12 months or more, and the data should be clean. So that's what you need as number one. The step two is, I would say, start with small and high impact models. Maybe focus on donor retention and campaign response. These, I think, are solutions that can deliver quick wins. And it also builds organizational confidence, right? And you can also demonstrate a return on investment when you pick uh, solutions or problem areas that can show high ROI. That helps. So it's good to pick them. I've obviously spoken about donor retention and campaign response. If you think it is others and not just these, then you can pick them as well. Just that you make sure you pick the models that are likely to give you high impact. And I would also say you shouldn't try to predict everything at once. Pick one area. Let's prove that the concept works. I mean, how will you prove it? You will have to measure the results, of course, and then you can expand the predictive models to other areas which you want to cover. Finally, it's about organizational capability. I spoke about tools that are there, which even nonprofits can use. And honestly, since I lead a data science team, I can tell you this: you don't need a PhD in data science to get started. The tools like Excel, Power BI, and low-code ML platforms, we have one of our own as well. So all of this can actually help you achieve predictive analytics objectives for most organizations, irrespective of their size. The key is building the capability gradually and ethically. I'll underline both of them, gradually and ethically. So you can transform your mission from just hopeful to strategic with the power of predictive analytics. It isn't about replacing human judgment or intuition. It's really about enhancing your decision making with data driven insights that will help you achieve your objectives faster. I think that's all I have. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
That's already a lot. Thank you so much, Pradeep.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any question coming from anyone? You can just go ahead directly, ask them right away. Otherwise, if you don't dare asking in front of 20 people, which I understand, I will just add the survey link again for all of you. Please, please, please to answer so we can really understand the needs. And we were discussing with Subrata also on how their team of data and analytics could maybe keep on answering your questions on data and analytics if you want to have more of a one-to-one discussion. And if so, Subrata would really be the good contact. Subrata, would you prefer to do? Should they add in the survey that they're interested to be contacted in a one-to-one discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that would be helpful. And look forward to talking about data analytics and many more things. Actually, Pradeep wanted to show also there's a demo on an auto ML solution we have. So look forward to discussing more on your specific areas where you want to focus on.
So the team is like, it's a really skilled team, and if ever you can have like a one-to-one discussion with their team, I would really encourage you to do that, to come with your challenge, your problematic, and ask just for guidance on how to organize that. But thank you so much, Pradeep, for this session. It was really informative, and thank you, Subrata, also. Can we have a group WhatsApp or something of the sort? I think what I'll do is I'll just email all of you, the participants of today. And so you will all have the emails of the participants. I don't, just in case someone doesn't want, please write to me that you don't want to be spammed. But in this email list, I'll share the PDF of the slides of Pradeep. Plus, I will put the workshop with a private link on our Think Human Fund YouTube channel. And I will do the same for last time. And if you have questions, you can share during really inside this group of emails. And if you want a one-to-one with our specific team, please ask Subrata in the survey. Normally, everyone who is in the call today, I think I have all of your contacts if you have accepted the call. So, because I will contact only those who have accepted the call of today. And any other questions? All good. So the next meeting is going to be, I don't remember. Let me go back on my slides. Don't remember. I think it's obviously in October. And the next
21st of October.
Thank you so much.
21st of
So I'll put the link of the next meeting too, which is also going to be about data and analytics. But I think you're going to do a demo of IXLO also. So using
Sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much again for your time, team, and thanks for everyone's participation, and hopefully it brought you some new insights on this specific topic. It's 24th of October. 24th. Yes.
24th
Good.
of October.
Right.
Thank you, Preet.
See you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.